Comedian Bert Kreischer, he is without a tour bus. This is after his caught fire in Minnesota. It happened Sunday. This is on 94 up in Prairie View Township, about half an hour southeast of Fargo. Only the driver was on board.
At 53, Bert Kreischer posted a photo that stopped the internet cold. His tour bus burned completely to the frame on a frozen Minnesota highway. He wrote 6 words: "We are all safe, but my bus is gone." But here is what he did not say in that caption. Every single person on that tour was supposed to be asleep inside that bus when it caught fire. This is what actually happened. One last night on the road. Before we go anywhere, let us start with the photograph that Bert Kreischer posted on Sunday, March 15th, 2026, because that image is the reason you clicked on this video in the first place. The photo shows a touring coach sitting on the shoulder of Interstate 94 in rural Minnesota. There is no paint left on it, no walls, no interior, no roof. What remains is a completely blackened steel skeleton on the asphalt, barely recognizable as something that used to carry human beings. The bus had burned so completely and so fast that investigators examining the scene could not determine what had started the fire. The official cause was listed as unknown. Everything aboard was destroyed. Now, the number that makes that image truly terrifying is 15. That is how many seconds it took from the moment the fire started to the moment the entire front cabin was a wall of flames. That is how much time the only person left on that bus had to escape. A veteran driver named Dewey made it. He heard a single pop from the roof. Smoke filled the cabin instantly, and he got himself out. What makes that survival mean something far darker is this. Less than 12 hours before that fire started, 5 other people were supposed to be on that bus, all of them asleep in the rear sleeping quarters. They were not on it because of a freak tire blowout in the middle of a Minnesota snowstorm at midnight. A blowout that stranded them, frustrated everyone, delayed the whole tour, and forced them to abandon the bus entirely. That tire is the only reason any of them are alive right now. To understand how close it actually came, let us go back to Saturday night, March 14th, and walk through every detail of how this story unfolded, because the full picture is something else entirely. By the spring of 2026, Bert Kreischer was operating at a level that very few comedians ever reach. His 6th Netflix special, Lucky, filmed in Tampa, Florida, had just landed inside Netflix's top 10 most-watched shows globally. All 6 tapings sold out within 24 hours of tickets going on sale. His podcast, 2 Bears, 1 Cave, co-hosted with Tom Segura, was sitting inside the top 10 podcasts worldwide. His vodka brand Porosos was selling faster than shelves could be restocked. His Permission to Party World Tour had launched in fall 2025 and was already on pace to outperform the previous year when Bert ranked as the 6th highest-grossing comedy touring act on the entire planet. Forbes had put his name alongside the words, "one of the best storytellers of his generation." After wrapping another sold-out show at the arena in Fargo, North Dakota, Bert, 2 fellow comedians, his personal assistant, and his personal trainer all climbed aboard the tour bus just before midnight. The plan was what it always is on a run like this: sleep through the drive, wake up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and do it all over again. The bus rolled out of Fargo into the dark and the cold, and nobody on board had a single reason to feel anything other than tired. That is the thing about the worst nights of your life. They almost never feel like the worst night when they are just beginning. Somewhere in the black stretch of Minnesota highway, something no one could have predicted was about to split that ordinary night wide open, and it would set off a chain of events that nobody on that bus would fully understand until they saw the photographs the next morning. Terror at 60 miles per hour in a snowstorm. 1 hour outside of Fargo, on the dark flat stretch of Interstate 94, the front right tire of the tour bus destroyed itself. Not a slow puncture, not a pressure warning that gives the driver time to ease over. The tire ripped completely free of the rim at highway speed with 0 warning and no explanation. There was no road debris, no impact, nothing identifiable to explain it. The bus shuddered. The driver regained control, and they pulled to the shoulder as a snowstorm built around them. There was no town nearby, no service exit, nothing but the highway, the dark, and the wind. What makes this feel even stranger is the experience sitting behind those two steering wheels. The bus carried two drivers, and both of them had 35 years behind the wheel of touring coaches. Between them, that is 70 years of night drives, mechanical failures, and every kind of situation a vehicle can create. When asked about the tire, both of them said the same thing independently. They had never seen one fail this way. It did not blow the way tires typically blow. It simply separated from the rim on a straight road for no reason either of them could explain. Bert would later confirm this directly to People magazine. "We hit nothing, and it was no fault of the driver." Bert did what Bert does when chaos arrives. He walked outside into the snowstorm, lit a cigar, and went live on Instagram for 16.8 million people. He stood on the shoulder of Interstate 94 at midnight in a blizzard, documenting the whole situation in real time, with the unbothered energy of a man who has survived enough disasters to know that even this one will eventually resolve itself. He looked annoyed. He did not look scared. The two drivers worked the phones trying to get a replacement tire delivered to their location out on the highway. They waited approximately 2 hours. A heavy-duty touring coach tire delivered to the middle of nowhere on a Minnesota interstate in a blizzard at midnight turned out to be exactly as impossible to arrange as it sounds. After 2 hours of standing in the cold and getting nowhere, they accepted the situation and made the only call left. They had no idea that the decision they were about to make, born entirely out of frustration and exhaustion, was the only thing standing between 5 sleeping people and a fire that would leave nothing behind but metal bones on the asphalt. They left the bus behind. There is one rule in touring that does not bend for weather, flat tires, or bad luck. The show must go on. Thousands of people in Cedar Rapids had already bought tickets, made plans, booked dinners, arranged babysitters. None of them knew about the tire. What they needed was for Bert Kreischer to be standing on a stage the following evening. Bert's representative, Rob Greenwald, confirmed the details to TMZ. 2 separate crew buses were arranged to pick up the stranded group from the shoulder of Interstate 94 and continue south to Iowa. 5 people who had planned to travel together all night split across 2 vehicles and kept moving toward the next city. All except one person. Bus driver Dewey stayed behind. It was not a dramatic moment. It was simply the job. You do not abandon a 30,000-pound touring coach unattended on the shoulder of a major interstate in the middle of the night. Somebody stays with it until morning when the situation can be properly resolved. Dewey was that person. He had 35 years behind the wheel and had been in inconvenient situations before. He settled in for the night, alone on the bus, on the shoulder of Interstate 94, with the snowstorm outside and the hazard lights blinking into the dark. A completely dark highway in the middle of the Minnesota prairie. A 30,000-pound coach sitting dead on the shoulder. One man inside, not worried, not scared, just experienced enough to know that a broken tire is a problem to be solved, not a crisis to survive. The crew drove away toward Iowa. The bus sat there on the frozen highway as the hours ticked past midnight and into Sunday morning. Nobody looked back. There was nothing to look at. It was just a bus waiting for morning. But somewhere inside that dark, silent, abandoned coach, something had already begun. Not loudly, not visibly, just quietly consuming itself in the cold, the way the most dangerous things always do, completely undetected, until the moment there is absolutely nothing left to save. Dewey heard a pop. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the Minnesota State Patrol logs a call at 12:21. A touring coach is on fire on the shoulder of eastbound Interstate 94, Prairie View Township, Minnesota. A trooper and a local fire department are dispatched immediately. But the call came after the moment that changed everything, and that moment is everything. Dewey is alone on the bus, parked on that shoulder since 2 in the morning, sitting with the inconvenience of the situation the way patient, experienced people do. The morning has been quiet, the highway humming outside, Everything completely ordinary. Then he hears a pop from the roof of the vehicle. One sound, not an explosion, not a grinding mechanical failure, just a single dull pop from somewhere above him. In most circumstances on most days, you look up, look around, and go back to what you were doing. Dewey did not get that option. Before he can process what the sound means, the interior fills with thick smoke. Not gradually, not the slow, creeping kind that gives you time to react, but instantly and completely, flooding the cabin within seconds. Dewey moves, gets to the door, gets outside, and is standing on the cold asphalt when he turns and watches the entire front cabin become a complete wall of flames. A single breath of time from the pop to full engulfment. When the State Patrol and Fire Department arrived, the bus had already burned completely down to its steel frame. Investigators examined the wreckage and could not determine the cause. Officially unknown. No other vehicles involved. Dewey walked away without a scratch. The sleeping area on a touring coach sits at the rear of the vehicle, which is exactly where the crew sleeps on overnight drives. If Bert and his two fellow comedians, his assistant and his trainer, had been on that bus as originally planned, they would have been asleep in those rear quarters, in complete darkness, at the exact moment the fire started. Smoke from a front cabin fire moves backward through the vehicle, and it filled that bus in seconds with one fully awake person who moved immediately and still barely made it out. 5 people asleep in the rear would not have woken up in time. Hay would not have had that razor-thin window to understand what was happening and find a way out. Bert said it without softening it at all. Had we slept on that bus, we all would have been trapped in the back, and we would all be dead. The flat tire at midnight, the 2 hours stranded in a snowstorm, all the frustration and the cold, every single bit of it was the only reason they were not on that bus when that window ran out. Dewey walked away with his life, but what Bert was about to discover when he looked at those photographs stopped him completely cold in a way that had nothing to do with the Minnesota weather. Nothing left but ash and cheese. The photograph that landed on Bert's Instagram that Sunday afternoon told the whole story without needing a single word of explanation. A touring coach reduced to a completely blackened steel skeleton on the shoulder of Interstate 94. No paint, no walls, no interior, no roof. Just the bare frame sitting on the frozen asphalt in the gray March light. Looking less like a bus and more like the aftermath of something that should never have happened. Everything aboard when the crew stepped off in the snowstorm was gone. All of Bert's clothing, except the outfit he had been wearing at 2 in the morning, was ash. All crew belongings, all equipment, all the food and supplies that turn a touring coach into a livable working space, completely gone. Bert and the entire crew had to load into a van and drive to a store in Cedar Rapids to buy brand new clothing just to have something to wear for the rest of the tour. Bert wrote the caption himself, and it was quieter than anything he had posted in years. "We are all safe, but my bus is gone. God works in mysterious ways." No joke, no callback, just a man who had stared at a very close call and felt it exactly for what it was. And then, in the Instagram story that followed, he came back in exactly the way his audience needed him to. After describing the 15 seconds and saying plainly that they would all have been dead, he paused, looked at the camera, and said the thing that broke the internet in both directions at once. "All my meats and cheeses. We had so much meat and cheese in there." The comments arrived like a wave. Andrew Huberman wrote that he was so relieved Bert was okay. Actor Joel List said he was very grateful Bert was alive and that the photographs were tremendous. Hundreds of fellow comedians, musicians, athletes, and millions of fans flooded in with the exact mixture of genuine relief and uncontrollable laughter that only Bert Kreischer manages to produce from a situation that by every right should have been nothing but devastating. The same afternoon his bus finished burning on that Minnesota highway, Bert's phone lit up with news from Netflix so absurdly timed It felt like the universe was personally writing his next special. The cruelest, funniest timing in Hollywood. On the exact same Sunday that his tour bus burned down to its frame, Netflix officially announced that Free Bert, the semi-autobiographical sitcom he co-created, executive produced, and stars in alongside actress Arden Mirren and newcomer Lilu Lang, had been renewed for a second season. The same Sunday, the same 24 hours. Career high and near-death catastrophe delivered together on one afternoon, as if someone had specifically designed the day to test the absolute outer limits of how much a person can feel at one time. His Netflix special Lucky had just debuted in the platform's global top 10. The Permission to Party World Tour was on track to break records from the previous year. His podcast was in the global top 10. His vodka brand was performing, and now a second season of his own sitcom had just been greenlit. All of it simultaneously true while he stood in a Cedar Rapids clothing store in the only outfit he owned, buying emergency socks because every other piece of clothing he had brought on tour was sitting in a pile of cooling ash on a Minnesota highway. The bus burned, the show got renewed, and the universe handed Bert Kreischer everything, and then took his bus on the same afternoon, as if to make absolutely certain he was not getting too comfortable. Standing at the collision point of the worst and best day of his entire career, Bert Kreischer said something on camera that nobody who watched it will forget, and it had nothing to do with comedy at all. The man who survived himself. Bert Kreischer has built his entire career on the performance of surviving his own disasters. Every special, every bit, every stage appearance is a version of the same premise. Bert gets into something enormous, survives it through luck and chaos and sheer forward momentum, and turns it into the funniest story you have ever heard. The performance of surviving things is the product, what 4 billion content impressions are built on. This was not that kind of story. It was 5 people who would have been sleeping in the back of a bus that became a wall of flames in 15 seconds. Real in a way that none of the previous disasters were, because the previous ones always ended with Bert standing on a stage laughing about them. This one almost did not end with Bert standing anywhere. When he appeared on Instagram the morning after, he was not performing, not setting up a punchline. He was unshaven, wearing clothes from a store in Iowa, saying something simply true. Had we slept on that bus, we all would have been trapped in the back and we would all be dead today. He said it, then said it again quieter, not for effect, but because once was not quite enough for it to land inside him. And then he said the line that will follow this story forever. So today, as frustrated as you may get, realize everything is a blessing. Not a punchline, just a 53-year-old man at the top of everything he ever built, saying the simplest and most honest thing there was to say. The Permission to Party World Tour continued without a single canceled date. Because underneath all the chaos, everything Bert has ever made is about one thing. He does not stop. He survives, gets back on the bus, and drives toward the next city and the next crowd. A random flat tire at midnight. A bus in flames by afternoon. 5 lives that should have been inside it. You can call it coincidence, but coincidence does not show up that perfectly. What do you call it? Drop in the comments.